I was scrolling through a live stream of a massive conservative youth summit recently, and from the back of the room, it looked like a sea of absolute, unwavering unity. The energy was electric, thousands of people in the same hats, cheering for the same speakers, and booing the same liberal elites with a practiced, synchronized intensity. It felt like watching a monolithic force, a single, unbreakable machine. But then the speaker on stage, a popular influencer with millions of followers, brought up a specific question about foreign military aid. In an instant, the atmosphere curdled. It wasn't a protest from the outside, it was a civil war from within. One section of the crowd started screaming, "America first," as a demand to bring every cent home, while another section, just a few rows away, began chanting in support of the foreign intervention, calling the others weak or un-American. The confusion in the room was palpable. They were all wearing the same uniform, but they were clearly playing entirely different games. It made me realize that the America First slogan isn't a policy manual, it's a Rorschach test. To one person in that room, it meant total isolationism. To the person sitting next to them, it meant global dominance with no apologies. This wasn't an isolated glitch or a random argument. It was a glimpse into the reality that the media, and often the opposition, completely misses. We tend to talk about the radical right or the Médier bloc as if it's a solid, coherent brick. But if you look closer, that brick is held together by some very thin glue. Behind the red hats and the shared enemies lies an unstable coalition of factions that are increasingly at each other's throats over what the movement actually stands for. To understand where American politics is going, we have to stop looking at the unified front and start looking at the cracks.
That is, wow. That image of a crowd, a supposedly unified crowd, just turning on itself in an instant. That really is the perfect place to start.
It felt like the ground shifted under my feet just watching it on a screen.
Because we spend so much of our time, in political analysis, looking at the external conflicts. It's always red versus blue, left versus right. It's a football game.
Exactly. Who's winning, who's losing?
We completely, and I mean completely, miss the internal structural integrity of these movements themselves. And the source material we have in front of us today, it really suggests that the structural integrity of the American right is, well, it's a lot more compromised than the polling numbers might have you believe.
Oh, it's compromised. The stack of sources we have today it's huge.
Right.
And it's dense. I mean, we've got some heavy-hitting political science papers talking about something called the hollow party thesis.
Right.
Then there's some deep sociological research on a concept I've never heard of before, anomie, and how it all stems from the 2008 financial crisis.
A really fascinating framework for understanding this moment.
And it gets even more specific. We've got reports on the collapse of local journalism, which seems unrelated at first, but it's not. And then some very pointed reporting on the recent infighting, the really heated stuff over foreign policy in the Middle East.
So the mission for this deep dive really is to just dismantle that monolith, to take that image of the solid red brick you mentioned and show the cracks. We're going to look at the structural fractures, how the actual party machinery has broken down.
The nuts and bolts.
Exactly, the nuts and bolts. Then we'll get into the ideological fractures with the laser focus on that foreign policy split you saw in the crowd. And finally, we have to talk about the sociological fractures, the human element, the why behind all of this, why the temperature is just so incredibly high.
I think we have to start with the machinery, the actual bones of the party, because I think we all have this assumption that a political party is a strong thing. It's a fortress, right? An institution.
A coherent organization with a boss and a hierarchy.
Yes. But I was reading this story, and it's one of these narrative pieces from our stack that really stuck with me. It's about a guy. Let's call him Arthur. And Arthur, to me, represents something that, well, I don't think it really exists anymore.
Okay.
So Arthur is a retired insurance adjuster. He lives in a suburb in Pennsylvania. And for 30 years, he was a precinct captain for the Republican Party.
Oh, a lifer.
A total lifer. And when you read how Arthur describes his job back in, say, the 90s, it sounds, honestly, it sounds boring.
As it was probably designed to be.
Intentionally boring. His entire world was defined by something he called the platform. And he means that literally. He had a binder, a thick, physical white binder filled with white papers on fiscal responsibility, on trade tariffs, on municipal bonds and deregulation.
The binder is such a great symbol. It's a physical manifestation of a time when the party was, first and foremost, a policy engine. It was about ideas, however dry they were.
And Arthur believed in that binder. He genuinely believed in it, and he believed in a meritocratic ladder.
Yeah.
If you wanted to run for city council in his town, you had to know what was in that binder. You had to come and impress the gatekeepers.
The gatekeepers.
Yeah, the town elders, the senior policy wonks, the people who had been around forever. There was a real vetting process. It wasn't exciting, it wasn't sexy, but it was ordered. It was logical. It had a system.
It had a structure.
It had a structure. But this is where Arthur's story takes a turn. He hadn't been active for a few years, but he recently decided to go to a meeting at a local VFW hall. He walks in expecting to see the old crowd, the other binder people.
The guys in the sensible shoes.
The guys in the sensible shoes. But he walks into this hall, and it wasn't the town elders anymore. It was a completely different species.
Yeah.
You had mechanics with full sleeves of tattoos standing next to stay-at-home moms who knew every single detail about homeschooling laws, but couldn't tell you what a municipal bond was. You had these young tech guys who were super into crypto, but didn't seem to care at all about the capital gains tax. It was this kaleidoscopic crowd, as the source puts it.
Love that phrase.
And Arthur just stood there, completely bewildered. He said the gatekeepers he used to report to, the ones who held the keys, they had just vanished. They weren't there. And the people in the room, they weren't there to debate the finer points of a sewage bill.
No.
They were there because they were angry. They were there because they felt that the old system, the system Arthur loved, the binder system, had totally ignored them. And for Arthur, it felt like the entire logic of the party had just been erased and replaced by a feeling.
It's so interesting that Arthur, from his perspective, sees this as a recent thing, like a hostile takeover that just happened.
It feels that way to him, for sure.
But if we dig into the political science papers in our stack, particularly the ones that look at party reform, what Arthur is witnessing is actually the end result. It's the final scene of a movie that started way back in 1968.
1968? Wow. That feels like ancient history compared to the MAGA movement. How do you connect those dots?
It's a root cause. It is the absolute origin story. We have to go back to the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago. This is one of those pivotal moments in American history that I think most of us just kind of glaze over. But it explains everything about the situation Arthur finds himself in today.
Okay, set the scene for us. Chicago, 68.
It's chaos. Absolute chaos. In the streets, you have thousands of anti-Vietnam War protesters. They're clashing with the Chicago police. There's tear gas wafting into the hotel lobbies. It is a war zone.
It's a riot.
But inside the convention hall, inside the bubble, the Democratic Party establishment is getting ready to nominate its candidate for president. And that candidate is Hubert Humphrey.
Vice president at the time. The ultimate establishment pick.
The ultimate insider. But here is the kicker. And this is the part that just drove people insane at the time. Hubert Humphrey had not entered a single primary election.
Not one.
Not one. In fact, in the primaries that were held, voters had overwhelmingly supported anti-war candidates like Eugene McCarthy and Robert Kennedy before he was assassinated. But the gatekeepers, the guys in the smoke-filled rooms, the party bosses, the union heads, the people Arthur would have recognized, they completely ignored the voters.
They just waved them off.
They used their institutional leverage as party insiders to hand the nomination to Humphrey. They did it because they felt he was the safer, more competent, more electable choice. They thought they knew better.
So the famous smoke-filled room actually worked. It successfully overrode the will of the voters to pick the candidate the party elite wanted.
It worked in the immediate short-term sense, yes. Humphrey got the nomination. But the backlash was, it was nuclear. The base felt betrayed. It was seen as profoundly, fundamentally undemocratic. The party was literally ripping itself apart on national television.
And Humphrey went on to lose the election to Nixon.
He lost the election. And in the aftermath, the Democrats knew they had to do something drastic.
Yeah.
So they formed what was called the McGovern-Fraser Commission. And the mandate of this commission was simple: open up the party. Their entire goal was to take power away from the insiders, the bosses, the gatekeepers, the Arthurs of the world, and give it directly to the voters.
How did they do that?
They massively expanded the primary system. They created all these new rules that made it so that to win the nomination, you had to win the votes of the people. You couldn't just win the favor of the bosses anymore. And the Republicans, seeing the chaos on the other side, they quickly followed suit to avoid the same kind of implosion.
That sounds good, though. Power to the people. Isn't that the democratic ideal we're all taught in school? More democracy is better.
It is the democratic ideal. On paper, it's perfect. But this is where The law of unintended consequences just hits us like a freight train. There's a Stanford report in our stack that argues this is the critical inflection point. By stripping the gatekeepers of their power, we effectively remove the party's ability to act as a filter for its own candidates.
A filter? What do you mean by that?
Think about Arthur's binder again. That binder wasn't just a collection of policies, it was a test. The gatekeepers used to check candidates against that binder. They'd ask the tough questions. Are you competent? Are you sane? Do you actually agree with our core principle?
Do you belong here?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if the answer was no, the party boss could kill your campaign before it ever started. You couldn't get the money. You couldn't get the endorsements. You were a non-starter.
So the party was a filter. It kept the crazies out, for lack of a better term.
Bluntly, yes. It was a system of peer review. It prioritized experience and competence over raw popularity. But after these 1970s reforms, that filter is just gone. It's been completely dismantled. So now the party label, Republican, Democrat, it's just a vehicle. It's a shell.
A brand.
It's a brand. And if you are a celebrity or a billionaire or a populist firebrand with a huge following, and you can get 51% of the primary voters in your state to like you, the party leadership can't stop you. They have absolutely no leverage.
Which explains why the establishment always looks so helpless these days. You see these headlines all the time, right? GOP leadership worried about candidate X, but they can't actually do anything about it.
They can't do anything. The very mechanism of control, the ability to deny a nomination in that smoke-filled room, was taken away from them 50 years ago in the name of democracy. So when Arthur looks around that VFW hall and sees that kaleidoscopic crowd instead of the old guard, he's not seeing a hostile takeover. He's seeing the logical conclusion of a system where the party no longer gets to select its own members. The voters do. And the voters, they aren't checking the binder.
Okay, but hold on. Even if the smoke-filled room is gone, there's always been another gatekeeper, right? Money.
The firewall.
The ultimate firewall. We always hear you can't run a serious campaign without the backing of the big donors. If the Chamber of Commerce or the big establishment players decide to cut you off, surely that still kills a campaign, doesn't it?
That used to be the backup. You're absolutely right. If the party rules couldn't stop an insurgent candidate, the lack of funding would starve them out. But this brings us to the second massive structural shift our sources point to, the rise of the small dollar donor.
The internet.
The internet, and more specifically, the psychology of the $10 donation. There's a guest essay in our stack that breaks down the incentive structure here, and it is just fascinating.
Walk us through it.
In the old system, the Arthur system, if you wanted to fund a campaign, you had to fly to a fundraiser in a hotel ballroom. You put on a suit, and you'd have to convince 50 wealthy people to write you checks for $2,000 each.
The rubber chicken circuit.
The rubber chicken circuit. Now think about those people, the big donors. What did they want? They were business owners, executives. They generally wanted stability. They wanted tax cuts, sure, but they didn't want you to burn the entire government down. They had businesses to run.
Capital likes predictability. Chaos is bad for the bottom line.
Exactly. So their money came with a built-in moderating influence. The unspoken agreement was, don't be too crazy, or the check doesn't clear next quarter. But now, just look at the fundraising numbers for politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene, or on the left, someone like AOC or Bernie Sanders.
Okay.
The data in our stack shows that for some of these figures, up to 70% of their fundraising comes from small donors. These are people giving less than $200 at a time.
70%, that's a staggering number. That means they're completely independent of the big establishment money. They don't need the hotel ballroom anymore.
It means they are unfireable.
Yeah.
But you have to look at the incentive. Why does a guy in Nebraska send $10 to a congresswoman in Georgia who he can't even vote for? He's not doing it because he's deeply impressed with her white paper on bridge infrastructure.
He's doing it because he saw a clip of her on social media owning the other side.
He's doing it because he's mad. Small dollar donors are motivated almost exclusively by emotion, specifically outrage and fear. If you actually read the fundraising emails, and the researchers in our stack did this, they analyzed the language of these emails. It is apocalyptic.
Oh, I get them. They read like ransom notes.
They're not saying, help us pass this important bill. They're saying, they are coming for you. They want to destroy your way of life. I am the only one standing in their way. It's pure threat.
If you don't chip in $5 by midnight, the radical left wins. It's constant panic inducement.
That's the business model. So if you're a politician today, the most rational, most effective way to raise money is not to govern well. It's not to build consensus. It is to perform extremism. You have to keep your base perpetually angry to keep those credit card donations processing.
It's a feedback loop.
A vicious one. The most extreme voices get the most money, which gives them the biggest platform, which makes them more powerful than the actual party leadership.
So Arthur's binder isn't just irrelevant in this new world, it's a liability. If you try to talk about policy nuance, you're boring. And if you're boring, you're broke.
Which leads us directly to the core thesis from the political scientists Rosenfeld and Schlossman, the theory of the hollow party.
Okay, what is that?
It's the central paradox that Arthur is living through. On the one hand, the Republican Party today is incredibly strong in terms of partisanship. Tribal identity is off the charts. People identify with the label fiercely. They hate the Democrats with a burning passion.
The negative partisanship is the strongest it's ever been.
Absolutely. If you ask a Republican voter today if they would ever consider voting for a Democrat, they'd look at you like you have three heads. So the identity, the brand is strong, but the organization is hollow. It's weak. It's an empty shell.
So
the party is completely top-heavy. It exists in Washington, D.C., obsessed with media hits on cable news and sending out those fundraising email blasts we just talked about. But it has almost no presence on the ground anymore.
the Arthurs are gone.
The precinct captains are gone. The local committees are empty. The institutional knowledge has evaporated. It's basically a fundraising email list masquerading as a political institution.
That's a brutal way to put it.
But it's accurate. And we have to mention the final nail in the coffin for the old system: campaign finance reform and Citizens United.
The Super PAC era.
This is where it gets really counterintuitive. The Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act back in 2002, McCain-Feingold. The intention was good. It was to get soft money, big, unregulated donations out of politics.
Right.
But when the Supreme Court rules on Citizens United in 2010, it essentially said corporations and unions can spend unlimited money on politics because money is a form of speech. Since the official parties were so restricted by regulations, all that big money moved
outside. Into the shadows.
into the shadow parties. Super PACs, 501c4s. These outside groups can raise unlimited amounts of money from undisclosed donors. They run their own ads. They have their own data operations. They're completely independent of the official party.
And they're often more extreme. They'll attack the party's own candidates in primaries if they think they aren't conservative enough.
They do it all the time. So now you have a situation where the official party chair, the person who's supposed to be in charge, is arguably the least powerful person in the room. You have the shadow party running the attack ads, the candidate being fueled by small donor outrage, and the voters completely unmoored from any traditional platform or policy binder.
So when we say the party, we're really talking about a ghost. The actual structure that Arthur spent his life serving, the gatekeepers, the meritocracy, the binder, it wasn't just abandoned. It was systematically dismantled, piece by piece, reform by reform, algorithm by algorithm, until only the label remained.
A hollowed-out brand.
And that hollowness, that lack of a central nervous system, of a brain, that's what makes this next part of our deep dive so incredibly volatile. Because if there's no one at the wheel and there's no binder of agreed-upon policies, then what happens when the world throws a crisis at you? What happens when a war breaks out?
You get chaos.
You get chaos. And this brings us right to the foreign policy fracture. This is where the abstract theory meets the hard reality. Because you can fudge domestic policy versus you can talk vaguely about freedom and prosperity, and everyone can cheer for their own version of that. But when a war starts, it's a binary choice. You have to decide. Do we send the missiles or do we not?
There's no room for ambiguity there.
None. And to make this concrete, I want to introduce two more people from our source material. Let's call them Caleb and Bill. They live in a small town in South Carolina, so this is deep red country.
Right.
Caleb is a young guy, maybe early 30s. He runs a hardware store. He's a veteran, did 2 tours in Afghanistan. And those tours, they completely defined his politics. He came back feeling like he watched his friends get wounded and killed for absolutely nothing.
A common and tragic story.
To Caleb, the slogan America First isn't just a slogan, it's a survival strategy. It is a blood oath. It means not one more dollar, not one more soldier, for anyone, anywhere, period. He is a hardliner, a true isolationist.
The classic Fortress America worldview. Pull up the drawstring.
Exactly. Then you have Pastor Bill. Bill's in his 60s. He's one of Caleb's customers, a real pillar of the local community. For Bill, politics isn't about budgets or logistics. It's theological and it's civilizational.
A different framework entirely.
He sees the West as being under siege from radical ideologies, both at home and abroad. And for him, the alliance with Israel isn't just a line item in the defense budget. It is the absolute cornerstone of his worldview. He believes America has a biblical and a strategic duty to stand with Israel no matter the cost.
Two completely incompatible positions.
And the story goes that at a community barbecue recently, things got ugly. Caleb and Bill, who, remember, vote for the same people, wear the same hats, go to the same rallies, they got into a full-blown shouting match. Caleb was screaming, "Why are we sending billions of dollars to them when I can't even afford to fix the leaking roof on my store?" And Bill was shouting right back, "If we abandon them, we abandon ourselves. We are the weak ones if we walk away." And the key detail in the reporting is that they weren't just disagreeing, they were looking at each other like they were enemies.
That barbecue argument is a perfect microcosm. It is the single biggest fault line running through the conservative movement right now.
Okay.
And to really understand how massive a deal this is, we have to look at the history here again.
Okay.
For the last, 80 years, really since World War II, but it was solidified during the Cold War, the Republican Party was built on what was called the three-legged stool.
I remember this from civics class. You had the fiscal conservatives,
The tax cutters,
the social conservatives,
the evangelicals,
and the foreign policy hawks.
the hawks, the neoconservative consensus. And this third leg was, for decades, non-negotiable. The core idea was that American power was a force for good in the world, and that we had a duty to be forward deployed everywhere to stop communism and then later to stop terrorism.
And support for Israel was central to that.
It was a linchpin. It was seen as strategic. Israel was our unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Middle East, and for the evangelical base, for the pastor bills of the world, it was a religious imperative. This consensus held rock solid through Nixon, Reagan, both Bushes. Even Donald Trump, in his first term, largely governed within this framework, despite his isolationist rhetoric.
He moved the embassy to Jerusalem, for instance.
A huge gift to that wing of the party. But what Caleb represents, what that argument at the barbecue represents, is a total collapse of that third leg of the stool. It's not just wobbly anymore, it's broken.
And this fight is getting nasty at the very top, too. It's not just happening at community barbecues. The source material highlights this massive, very public feud between Steve Bannon and Ben Shapiro.
This is critical to understand, because Bannon and Shapiro are not just commentators. They are arguably two of the most influential media figures on the right. They shape the narrative for millions of people. And they are at open war over this exact issue.
So what happened?
It all went down at a Turning Point USA conference in Phoenix. And you have to note the venue. Turning Point is the big conservative youth movement. This isn't the old guard. This is the future of the party.
The next generation.
Exactly. Ben Shapiro gets on stage, and he basically draws a line in the sand. He represents the civilizational wing. He's Pastor Bill's intellectual champion. And he labeled the isolationists, the Calebs, charlatans. He argued that you cannot separate American interests from the survival of Western civilization, and that includes, non-negotiably, the state of Israel.
Strong words. So how did Bannon respond?
Bannon went nuclear. He got on his own platform and called Shapiro a cancer on the America First movement. The quote that really matters, the one I think historians will look back on as a turning point, is when Bannon looked into the camera and said, "Israel does not own American foreign policy anymore."
Wow, that is a staggering thing to hear from a prominent conservative figure. If someone had said that at a GOP convention in 2004, they would have been booed off the stage.
You would have been exiled from the movement for life. Your career would be over. But today, Bannon gets cheers for saying it, because he is tapping directly into that deep well of Caleb energy.
So what is the fundamental disagreement here? It feels deeper than just policy.
It's a fight over the definition of the nation itself. Camp One Shapiro, the old guard neocons, Pastor Bill, they see America as an idea, as the leader of a global civilization. And with that leadership comes responsibilities, alliances, and duties.
And Camp Two?
Camp Two Bannon, Tucker Carlson, the Caleb wing, they see America as a place. A physical piece of land with borders and citizens who are getting ripped off by foreign entanglements. Their question is always, what's in it for us?
Tucker Carlson is a huge voice in this, too. The sources mention his recent comments at the Doha Forum.
Tucker's question is always the same, and it's brutally simple. What are we getting out of this? He's called Israel a completely insignificant country in terms of American resources. He views foreign aid not as an investment, but as theft from the American people. He looks at Caleb's crumbling hardware store in South Carolina and says, that money belongs here. End of story.
It's a purely transactional view of the world.
It's purely transactional. And this is where we have to be really careful with that phrase, America first. We hear it so much now that we forget it has a history. This isn't a new slogan Trump just invented.
It goes back to the 1940s, the America First Committee.
Charles Lindbergh. Yeah. They were the group that was trying to keep the United States out of World War II to stop us from fighting the Nazis. They were pure isolationists. Now, that movement completely disappeared after Pearl Harbor because suddenly isolationism became impossible. But that dormant gene in the American body politic, it's been reawakened.
And it's mutated.
It's mutated. The difference now is that the new isolationists aren't just saying, let's stay out of the next war. They're saying the entire post-war alliance system itself is a scam designed to drain America dry.
So where does Trump himself land in all this? He's the de facto head of the party. Is he a Caleb or is he a Bill?
That is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? And the only honest answer is yes.
That's not very helpful.
No, but it's true.
Yeah.
Trump is a mirror. He reflects both sides of this argument back at them, depending on the day and the audience.
Yeah.
On one hand, he's the guy who moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He brokered the Abraham Accords. He constantly claims to be the most pro-Israel president in history. That's for Pastor Bill. But on the other hand, his deepest instincts are purely transactional, just like Caleb's. There's this incredible story in our sources about the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general.
The drone strike in Baghdad.
Right. A huge, risky move. Trump ordered it. But afterwards, first privately and then later publicly, he complained bitterly that Israel had backed out at the last minute. He felt that Prime Minister Netanyahu had pushed him to do it and then let the United States take all the heat while Israel stayed on the sidelines.
He felt like he got played.
Exactly. And for Trump, being played or looking weak is the ultimate sin. It doesn't matter if the alliance is strategically sound for America. If he feels like he isn't getting the better end of the deal personally, he will turn on a dime. This transactional isolationism creates a massive amount of unpredictability for our allies and our enemies.
It really feels like the younger generation of conservatives, the ones at that Turning Point conference, the TikTok generation, is raking hard toward Caleb's side.
The data absolutely supports that. For younger America First adherents, the neocons are the ultimate villains. They associate the U.S.-Israel alliance with the Iraq War, with the Patriot Act, with what they call the globalist project. To them, being a true nationalist means rejecting all of those foreign entanglements.
So we've got a situation where the structural glue of the party is gone. That's the hollow party. And now the ideological glue that held the foreign policy consensus together is completely dissolving.
The stool has lost two legs.
But there is one more layer to this. And honestly, as we've been going through the source material, this is the one that really keeps me up at night. Because you can, in theory, fix a party structure. You could maybe even negotiate some kind of foreign policy compromise. But you cannot easily fix a broken society.
This is where we get to the root of the anger.
This is the sociology of the movement. Why is the temperature so incredibly high? Why does a simple disagreement over policy feel like an existential threat to people's very being? To get at that, I want to talk about one more person. Her name is Elena. Elena lives in a small town in the Rust Belt. It's one of those places that used to make things glass, steel, auto parts. Now, according to the reporting, it mostly makes opioids and depression.
A familiar story, sadly.
And Elena's story isn't dramatic in the sense of a single sudden explosion. It's a slow-motion collapse, a death by 1,000 cuts. She told a reporter that just 10 years ago, her life had anchors. She had a steady job at a packaging plant. She was in a bowling league every Tuesday night. She went to a local church that was packed on Sundays. She had a community.
See, connection.
Yes. Then the packaging plant closed and moved overseas. She eventually got a job at a dollar store, but the hours are erratic, the pay is low, she can't plan anything. Then the bowling alley closed down because nobody in town had spare cash for league dues anymore. And then her church had to merge with another parish 3 towns over because the congregation had dwindled away.
So all of her anchors were just cut, one by one.
All of them. And Elena describes her life now as being atomized. That was her word. She feels like a single grain of sand. There is no we anymore. There is just I struggling to pay bills in isolation. But then she found a group online, a political group. And she says the first time she logged on and saw thousands of other people who were angry about the exact same thing she was, she said she physically felt a weight lift off her chest. She had found a new we.
Elena is describing, almost word for word, a sociological concept called anomie.
This is the French term, right?
It comes from Émile Durkheim, one of the founding fathers of sociology, writing way back in the late 19th century. Enemy translates roughly to normlessness or derangement.
What does that mean in practice?
Durkheim argued that human beings, we need limits, we need structure, we need society to provide us with a set of norms that tell us, this is what you can reasonably expect from life. This is where you fit into the grand scheme of things. If you work hard and play by the rules, this is your likely reward.
It's the social contract.
It is precisely the social contract. When a society is stable and healthy, those norms hold us. They give our lives meaning and predictability. We know who we are. But, Durkheim warned, when a society is hit by a massive dislocating crisis, a sudden economic depression, a rapid technological or cultural shift, the norms dissolve. The regulations on our expectations just break apart.
And that state of normlessness is enemy.
That is enemy. And it is a terrifying, disorienting feeling of being adrift in a void. You don't know what's true anymore, you don't know what's just, and most frighteningly, you don't know who you are.
And the source we have from La Trobe University, it points to one specific moment that triggered the state of mass enemy for modern America.
The 2008 global financial crisis. We cannot overstate how psychologically damaging this event was. It wasn't just about people losing money. It was about the moral fabric of the country being torn to shreds. People like Elena, they watched the rules get completely inverted. The bankers and financiers who caused the crash, who gambled with the global economy, they got bailed out by the government. They got to keep their bonuses. Meanwhile, the people who had followed the rules, who saved their money, who worked faithfully at the packaging plant, they lost their homes, their pensions, their entire sense of security.
The contract was breached. The central promise of America, work hard and you'll be okay, was exposed as a lie for millions of people.
It was a profound moral injury. And when that contract breaks, all authority loses its legitimacy. Why should Elena listen to the government or the mainstream media or the experts at the university? In her eyes, they're the ones who either caused the crash or let it happen. This creates what the paper calls political anomie. It's a total bottom-up rejection of the official narrative because the official institutions have proven themselves to be either corrupt or incompetent.
And this is made so much worse by the fact that she has nowhere else to go for information, locally. This is where the ghost newspaper phenomenon comes in, and it's a terrifying accelerator.
The report we have on the collapse of local journalism is just devastating.
Lay it out for us.
Okay, so imagine Elena's town. 20 years ago. It had a local paper, the Daily Herald or whatever it was called. It probably had a small team of reporters, and one of them sat in the back of the city council meetings every Tuesday night. If the mayor was caught stealing from the road budget to give a contract to his cousin, that reporter put it on the front page.
Basic accountability.
Basic accountability. But it was also about community. That same paper reported on the high school football team's victory, the church bake sale, the obituary for a beloved local figure. It mirrored the community back to itself. It created a shared reality.
Right.
But then, a private equity firm from New York buys the paper. They fire all the local reporters to cut costs. They sell the printing press and the downtown office building. The paper might still exist as a website, a ghost newspaper, but it's just running generic wire stories about national politics or celebrity clickbait.
So what happens to the town when the paper dies?
The research shows this really dangerous paradox. First, as you'd expect, local civic engagement completely collapses. Nobody runs for school board because nobody even knows there's an election coming up. Local corruption goes up. But, and this is the absolute key, voter turnout for national elections often goes up.
Wait, how is that possible? Why would turnout go up?
Because the local information diet has been replaced. If you can no longer read about your town's road budget, what do you read instead? You read the national outrage bait that's being fed to you by the algorithms on Facebook and Twitter. You read about the endless culture war.
So Elena's political identity becomes nationalized. She stops being a citizen of her town, concerned with local issues, and she becomes a soldier in a grand national war against the liberals or the globalists or whoever the enemy of the day is.
The void that was left by the bowling league, the church, and the local paper is filled by national partisan identity.
This makes so much sense. If you have no local tribe to belong to anymore, the national tribe becomes your only lifeline. It's your only source of identity and community.
And this is why the identity aspect of this movement is so fierce and so non-negotiable. One of our Spanish sources has this brilliant analysis of magia, not as a policy movement, but as a defensive identity.
A defensive identity.
We already said this movement brings together people who, on paper, should hate each other. You have libertarians who want zero government and zero tariffs, standing next to economic protectionists who want massive tariffs. You have deeply religious fundamentalists, and you have secular atheistic tech bros. What on earth do they have in common from a policy perspective?
Nothing, except a shared enemy.
But it's deeper than that. The movement offers them a home in the chaos of enemy. It gives them a new set of norms, a new story to make sense of their lives. And this is where the conspiracy theories, like QAnon, become so important.
We often just dismiss this stuff as crazy.
And from an objective factual standpoint, it is. But psychologically, for a person like Elena who is suffering from enemy, a grand conspiracy theory is a lifesaver.
How can a conspiracy theory possibly be a lifesaver?
Because what is the defining feature of enemy? It's chaos. It's the horrifying feeling that everything is random, meaningless, and broken. A conspiracy theory is the ultimate antidote to that chaos.
How?
It says, no, it's not random, it's not meaningless, there's a secret plan. There is a hidden war going on between the forces of good, us, and the forces of evil. And not only is there a plan, but victory is inevitable. It reorders the entire world. It turns the chaos into a coherent narrative.
It gives Elena a role to play.
It tells her that she isn't an atomized, forgotten failure whose life has fallen apart. She is a digital soldier fighting a historic battle for the truth. It gives her dignity, it gives her purpose, it gives her community.
That is an incredibly powerful psychological pull. And it explains why you can't just fact-check these things away. You're not arguing with a person about a fact, you're arguing with their psychological life raft.
You're trying to take away the only thing that's keeping them from drowning in the void. And they will fight like hell to protect that story, because the alternative is the unbearable chaos of enemy.
Okay, so let's try to pull all three of these layers together. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground here.
We have.
We started with the structure, the Hollow Party. We saw how the reforms that started way back in the 1970s, combined with the rise of small dollar donors and super PACs, completely dismantled the old gatekeepers. Arthur's binder is gone, replaced by a social media algorithm that rewards outrage. The party is a shell.
Then we move to the ideology, the foreign policy fracture. That 80-year-old consensus on American interventionism and unwavering support for Israel is completely shattering. You have the Caleb wing, the isolationist transactional nationalists in open war with the Pastor Bill and Shapiro wing, the civilizational interventionist conservatives, and Trump is just surfing the wave, playing both sides against each other.
And finally, we looked at the sociology, the deep undercurrent of enemy. The collapse of the social contract after 2008 and the death of local institutions has left millions of people like Elena feeling atomized and adrift. They are now using national political identity as a desperate substitute for community, for purpose, and even for religion.
And when you put all three together, you get a movement that is massive, it's loud, and it's incredibly intense. But it is also profoundly fragile.
Which brings us right back to that glue problem you mentioned at the start.
The thin glue.
The very thin glue. The movement is held together almost entirely by a shared enemy. Arthur, Caleb, Bill, and Elena are all wearing the same red hat because they all feel rejected and betrayed by the current system. They're all fighting against the liberal elite or the deep state or the globalists.
But they are fighting for completely different and in many cases mutually exclusive things.
Arthur wants his orderly, meritocratic, binder-based party back. Caleb wants to pull up the drawbridge and withdraw from the entire world. Bill wants to project American power abroad to save Western civilization. And Elena just wants a community that makes her feel like she isn't invisible.
And here is the dark central irony of the entire situation. As long as they're losing, or at least as long as they're in the opposition, they can stay united.
Yeah.
The shared enemy is powerful enough to keep them together.
But what happens if they win?
That is the ultimate danger for the movement itself. If they actually take power, if they vanquish their shared enemy, the glue dissolves overnight.
Then Caleb looks across the table at Bill and realizes, you want to send my tax dollars to fund a foreign war I think is a scam. And Bill looks back at Caleb and sees a weak traitor who is abandoning his duty. And Arthur looks at the populist chaos and realizes his binder is never, ever coming back.
The civil war from within that you saw in that live stream at the Youth Summit, that might not have been a glitch. That might just be the trailer for the movie.
It completely reframes the political stakes, doesn't it? We are witnessing a movement that is attempting to solve a deep, profound social crisis, loneliness, a loss of purpose, economic betrayal, with the very blunt, very inadequate tools of politics. We're trying to vote our way out of anomie. But if the coalition itself is built on a foundation of irreconcilable contradictions, then victory might be the one thing that finally causes it to break apart completely.
It's a sobering thought. The cracks are there, deep within the foundation. We just have to keep watching them.